right. Hey, my friends, welcome to Real Life Talk. And thanks so much for tuning into this episode. It really means the world to me that you're here. And I'm extremely pumped to introduce today's guest to you. Joining me today is Trevor Tyson. Trevor is a longtime mental health advocate and the founder and president of Transparent Media Company, which is a creative and digital marketing company helping people and brands bring their vision and mission to life with everything from branding development to merch design, creative consulting, and more. He also hosts the popular Trevor Talks podcast. And it's just a privilege and an honor. We've been trying to put this together for a little while now, and it's just a real honor to have Trevor on the show. So please join me in welcoming to the podcast for the first time, Trevor Tyson. And Trevor, hopefully all of our video and everything still looks good on your end. It's looking good on my end so far. And it's really just a blessing and honor to be talking to you today, my friend. So thank you for being here.
Dude, of course. Thank you for having me. And the video and audio are pristine. So hopefully it stays that way, right?
It's a good word, pristine. I like that. I
Pristine.
like
That's
that.
exactly what it is.
Yeah. So how you doing today, man? First of all.
Doing great. I'm excited to be here. Got to whip out the red whosoever's beanie, which means it's going to be
Come
a good
on.
day. So I'm excited. Thanks for having me.
I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it.
I'm
I think
feeling
that was a good choice.
it.
so,
I love it.
so first of all, where are you from originally? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a tiny town called Social Circle, Georgia, in the middle of nowhere.
That's
The
awesome.
city, they call it a city, but it's like one of those small towns with one stoplight. I don't get it. Like when people think of city, they're like, oh, Atlanta or Boston, something like that. Nah, we've got like a well in the middle of our like main street in Social Circle in front of the
Yeah.
one stoplight. So yeah, one stoplight city, as they call it. I call it a tiny town, but you know.
When they named it Social Circle, was that just like wishful thinking? Probably like we're really small, but one day it's gonna be happening. So it's
I like to think they're like, you know what? One day there's going to be a Trevor Talks here, and it's going to be pretty social. But you know what?
come
No,
on. Their dream
I
came true.
the dream came true. From what I've heard, it was like back in the 1800s or something. Like people would come together and have a social circle or something like that, and they just kept it. So here we are in 2022, and still growing and thriving, I guess. The big talk of the town right now is opposing a Rivian plant, which is like a electric automotive vehicle manufacturing company. They're like, we don't want Rivian here, and I'm like, I mean, if they give me a free car, like I'll take it. Like I don't care.
Come on. So you're still there today?
I am
You
still
s-
here
you, you still
today.
live there? Yeah.
I am, and I love it here. The cost of living is very well compared to most places. Cough, cough, California, Texas, Nashville. So
Mm,
buying a house and everything is a lot cheaper here. So I plan on staying for quite a
yeah,
while.
man. And correct me if I'm wrong. Do you have some kind of a connection to Alabama or
I
no?
do
I felt
not
like
have a
I
connection to
heard that
Alabama
somewhere.
except for the
Okay.
movie Sweet Home Alabama is really cool, and you know that's about it.
All right. Well, I'm in Alabama, and I don't know why, but I thought I read somewhere, heard something about you in Alabama. So that must have just been
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what it is. I had my first panic attack that I can recall in Birmingham, Alabama at Church of the Highlands.
okay.
Chris Hodges
Oh, at Church of the
Church.
Highlands. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So your
yeah,
first panic attack
yeah.
was in Alabama. Wow.
Most people are when they say Church of the Highlands, are like, "Oh, I found Jesus there," and I'm like, "Yeah, I tried to throw up in some bushes at an event there one time, like 2015 or 2016." Like, I would love to go back and have a positive experience. And it's not that they did anything wrong. It was like I was having a panic attack, and I'm just trying to like not have a panic attack. I didn't know what it was. So,
Yeah.
Birmingham, Alabama, that was the first spot. And my main attraction there was like, man, we're so close to Tuscaloosa. They had a killer tornado a few years ago.
Hmm.
So
Man. Yeah, they sure did. Oh, man. So I okay, well, I guess we're jumping into it quicker than I expected, but let's just roll, man. So you had a panic attack in Alabama first time, and you probably didn't know what was happening, right? Like you didn't know what was going on. What
yeah.
did you think was happening, or like how did you kind of deal with that?
Well, I felt really nauseous, so I thought I just needed to like get sick or something. And looking back, I'm like, I know that I was super stressed that day because I was supposed to speak at Shorter University the next day. And like,
Okay.
I didn't want to because I was anxious and I didn't realize I was anxious about it. So I'm having panic attacks, and I know that I didn't eat that day. So that was a factor in it as well. So I just felt like I needed to get sick, but I couldn't. And now I know it's a panic attack. And there was no real way to calm it in that position because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know that I was experiencing anxiety. I didn't know that it was going to go away. I didn't know
Mm,
anything about it. So I'm just there doing what 16, 17-year-old Trevor knew how to do best. And that's try to get sick in that moment, which didn't work.
wow.
And just had to suffer through that one. And later on, I learned how to maintain those, but it's
Yeah.
a growing process for sure. It took years.
That's so crazy, man. Can I talk to you about something that I don't think I've ever I don't think I've ever publicly spoken about it. I've had a few panic attacks in my life. They all happened in the same season. I'm assuming that's what they were. Anxiety attack, panic attack, something, I don't know if those are the same thing or they're different or not. But
Yeah, they're a little different, but in the same realm.
okay. Yeah, so I never had anything, diagnosed or anything like that, but it was at the beginning of my ministry. My wife and I were on the mission field in Mexico, and it was just kind of a tumultuous time. Like my father had just passed away that year, and we were like this newly married couple having financial struggles, and we were on the mission field, and I was outside of my element, just outside of my culture, and just everything was new, trying to figure out how to speak a language that I didn't know too well, and it's just like a lot of stuff. And man, I remember being in a church service and just having like standing there during worship with youth, like with a bunch of kids that we were like, leading in like this youth ministry. And I just remember standing there trying to worship, and just this incredibly kind of like heavy feeling of, it felt like a panic. It felt extremely anxious, almost like I was having a heart attack. I didn't think I was having a heart attack because I was, I'd never had any heart issues, and I was like how old was I? Like 22, 23. And I didn't really think it was that, but it was scary. And I just bring that up to say, and it happened maybe two or three times after that, um, all within a period of a month or so, where I was just dealing with incredible pressure that I didn't, for me, it was incredible pressure, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to deal with it. And that, led into some other things and whatever. But it was just like this thing. I just resonated with what you said there a second ago about I don't know how long this is going to last, if it's going to stop, if it's going to go away. And it felt like something that I feel like that even right there can just cause you to have more feeling of panic and more anxious feelings, because you're like, what is going to happen to me? Is this ever going to stop? And
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I've ever really opened up about that publicly. Like obviously my wife knew about it and stuff like that. It was a crazy thing, man. That period of time, and it culminated with me like not sleeping for like 3 nights in a row, and just spending hours just on my face crying out to God because I had no idea what to do. And eventually whatever that was, that just intense feeling that I was carrying, eventually it broke off of me. And I haven't I've had
Yeah.
anxious thoughts and worry and stuff like that, but never again to that extent. And so it was kind of a supernatural experience that God brought freedom into my life there. But anyway, I don't know, I just wanted to mention that because I kind of resonated with what you were
Yeah.
saying there.
And it's a big thing for a ministry leader, someone in the ministry field in general, to open up about anxiety and panic because everybody that's not a Christian or doesn't really understand what's going on are like, you just need to trust God more and this and that. And
Mhm.
a lot of times you need Jesus and therapy or Jesus and medication. And
Mm,
I had a pastor on, and this episode hasn't released yet. Pastor Louis Giglio went through a lot of like anxiety and panic during a
wow.
season of his life. and he was on a massive scale, like a global renowned pastor, and struggling with
Yeah.
that behind closed doors, and had to take months off
Hmm.
and had to go through the motions to figure out, like, okay, this is going on with me. And it's like, when you're in that position and you're in ministry, you don't know how people are going to respond. You have this weight on your
Yeah.
shoulders of people that are expecting you to have it all together, but you don't. And it's
Yes.
actually a toxic thing to think, like, if you put your pastor or a ministry leader on the same category as you would put Jesus, like, that's very unhealthy for the person that you're putting that pressure on and yourself, because you're viewing them as some sort of Messiah when they're not. They're there to carry a message, and they're there to encourage you and help
Yeah.
disciple you through some
Yeah.
of these things. But like, anxiety, panic, depression, mental health, these are things that people struggle with on earth, and we have to figure out like how it's going to work for us. There's no blueprint to figure out like a one size fits all for everyone. What worked for me may not work for you, Duke. What worked for you may not work for some of your listeners. It all depends, like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need to get help for this. Where do I start? And a lot of people struggle to get to that starting point. And when they can't get to that
Mm.
starting point, they can't start to recover and heal and help other people through that. So it's encouraging that you
Wow.
bring that up as a ministry leader, someone who's actively doing it, because it needs to be talked about a lot.
Bro, that was so beautifully articulated, everything you just said. Because the main thing going through my mind when that happened, and again, I was a 22 or 23-year-old kid, beginning of my ministry, but I had all these ministry leaders and people that I was looking up to. And when you're young like that, I mean, I felt like I had something to prove, you know what I mean? I felt like I had to, like, show myself to kinda, like, the other pastors and those that have been in ministry for a while, like, I had to measure up to some kind of a standard kind of a thing, and bro, just walking around with that, I felt so ashamed of which just made it so much worse. I felt so ashamed, I felt like, "How can I be a minister? How can I call myself a minister if I'm dealing with this?" And it was
Yeah.
such a lie in my head, but I think what it does is I think that speaks to the stigma that's kind of attached to mental health stuff in general, but more so in the church, like in the body of Christ, how I think so often there's such a negative feeling, negative stigma attached to it. I feel like there's extremes where people say like, "Oh, that's just the devil. You just got to cast the devil out." And there's like other extremes where people want to just kind of sweep it under the rug and act like it's not really happening or whatever. And man, I just remember carrying that feeling like I was, bro, I'll tell you, one of the most ashamed I moments of my life when all that was going on. I opened up to my wife about it, and we ended up talking to my wife's parents. So my wife is Mexican. She's from Mexico, and so I was a missionary on the mission field. But it was funny because I met my wife in America, but then we went to Mexico to
Yeah.
minister, and we were on her turf, and so her parents took me to see a doctor. And we went to the doctor, and I told him, what I was feeling, what was going on. He prescribed me, or it's a little bit different in Mexico how medicine works, but he gave me antidepressants, and that right there made me feel just so like it made me feel so low. Like, it just made me feel like, how can I be a Christian? How can I be not just a
Mm,
Christian, but how can I be a minister, someone who's, aspiring to lead people in ministry, and they're giving me antidepressants. And long story short, I took one and it made me feel so bad that I just decided not to take them anymore. And that's kind of
yeah.
when I got into that point where I just started crying out to God and I was in this place. But bro, there was just such a lie in my head that made me less of a person, less of a
Yeah.
Christian, less of a minister, that it disqualified me from being able to lead others to Jesus or lead others in the church or whatever. And yeah, man, like how uh, I know that you live in this world and you talk to all kinds of ministers and all this kind of stuff. I mean, is that something that you feel like comes up a lot with people in ministry and stuff like that, of just kind of, maybe they're struggling with something and it just makes them
Mhm.
feel like they're maybe disqualified or just dealing with those thoughts of shame?
Sure. And a lot of people do struggle with that. And the one question I like to bring up, and I'll ask you directly, like, when you get a headache, do you take an ibuprofen or an Advil? Right?
You're right.
answer
Yeah.
for a ton of
Yeah.
people is
No
yes. It's
problem with
like,
that, right?
okay, so
Yeah.
you're struggling with depression, anxiety, in like an uncontrollable manner. Do you want to like God can heal? Like, not saying he can't. Sometimes he uses
Sure.
medicine to do it though. And for me, like I remember for probably 3 years of after Birmingham, I wouldn't like admit that I had an issue or anything.
Mm,
When I went to therapy and went to a psychiatrist and got on like an antidepressant for like panic disorder, it's not like the worry side of it that comes from anxiety. It's like I'll just have random panic attacks. I've been in
mm,
Ruth Chris Steakhouse in downtown Atlanta meeting friends who were newly engaged for a meal and having an uncontrollable panic leave. Like I had to
mm,
leave the restaurant and it's uncontrollable. Like I'll go to the bathroom, I'll try to puke. Like that seems to be a reoccurring thing for me is like I just gotta go puke. But like
just puke
that's
this
one of those
off.
things in my head. But yes, that was like one of those moments where I'm like, okay, this is getting out of hand. Like it's
Yeah,
starting
man.
to take
Yeah.
over my life, essentially. And working for AT&T for a few years, which was great. It put me in an excellent position to like when I did jump back into like doing the whole public speaking thing and essentially starting podcasts and touring, like I already own my house. As you know, like when you're in this field, like being a business leader, like you have to have all these different like income statements and stuff to purchase a home and all these things. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have been able to do that in a ministry standpoint. So like there was blessing that came out of that tenure with the company, but like it wasn't for me. And I know for a fact, like God had called me to do something else, but I was like just finding satisfaction in all the wrong things of like, okay,
Mm,
you own a house, you're doing this, you're doing that, you look successful on the outside. You're the number one sales rep in the this part of the US. They fly you to Cancun, treat you like a king, all this stuff, like trophies, fool's gold, essentially.
hmm.
And it wasn't
Wow.
until like I broke free from that and was just like, I can't do this anymore. Took a leap of faith, ended up working and doing ministry, like trying to get back out there. And it was a very hard time for me because I had to address a lot of the trauma that I had gone through in my life. And I'm still addressing it. People in my like close circle, not that they would, but if they were asked like on the stand, like, yeah, Trevor's a broken dude, man. Like he still struggles with his stuff. Like he's not perfect. There are skeletons in the closet. And it's like, dang, like how can God use somebody like that that's struggling with
Mm,
anxiety and depression and continues to fall into it and just fights and battles through it? Like he must not be trusting God enough, but that simply isn't the case. Like a lot of people are born with a lot of different things. Some people are born with a taste for lust, like whether it's sexually or financially, whatever it is, and you keep chasing that, and you stumble and you have to get back up and start looking vertically again. And it's like, don't quit trying. Don't quit running
mm.
the race. Get back up, get back on the horse and go again. And man, like just to circle back on the medicine part of it, like some people really need it. And that's the balance that they have to be able to pursue their callings in life. And there's a lot of different theological perspectives on it. And like I said earlier, like God can heal you, but if he doesn't, like he might use this to heal you, and there's nothing wrong with that. So like people that
Mhm.
are listening that
Yeah.
are actively on antidepressants, like that's something I have to take like actively. Don't be ashamed. It's not a badge of
Yeah.
honor. It's
Yeah.
not one size fits all. There is trauma in your life that you might need to work through, and maybe you'll get off of them one day. But if you don't, like there's a Mercy Me song called Even If, and it's like, I know you're able and I know you can to save through the fire with your mighty hand, but even if you don't, my hope is in you alone. That just rings true to me to this day. It's
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna get back up. I'm gonna keep fighting. I'm actively fighting. Like here in my red beanie, the little Trevor Talkie thing up there. Like I'm still a broken human. Um, I just choose to get back up and fight, and that's simply it. Like that's a part of the battle, and that's something that's worked heavily for me. It's not for everybody, but from my personal chair, like perspective, it definitely
Mhm.
is.
Yeah, man. No, it's so beautiful, and again, yeah, it's something that I feel like the devil will just use anything to lie, to manipulate, to try to cheat you out of the destiny and the calling and the assignment that God has placed on your life, whether that's for ministry, business, to, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But he'll just use anything that he can to try to get you to feel like you're less than, or to feel like you don't qualify. And the reality is that none of us qualify because of anything that we've done. We qualify because of what Jesus did for us. And so for me to stand here and to think that, yeah, like, for whatever reason, now I have some kind of an issue, or something that I'm dealing with in my life, and I'm imperfect, like, for me to it's just so easy to buy into that lie that says that it knocks me out, or that it's over, or that I couldn't measure up, because at the end of the day, like, again, none of us measure up. It's all because of what he's done, because of his grace. And I think that, as you said, there are those who God just supernaturally heals in a moment, right? And there's those that God heals through a process of time. And I think that just either way, like, it's all by the grace of God, right? So
Yeah.
if that healing comes so quickly, I mean, there's people that get healed of things. I've seen people healed of things they're not even asking for it. They're just in the room, they're just in a worship service, or they're just whatever, and it just happens. And it's like, oh God, you're so good. But we cannot diminish the goodness of God, the grace of God that happens along the journey for somebody who is going through a process of recovery, or a process of walking out healing in their life,
Mm.
you know?
And it's such a powerful thing for someone to sit there and, like, I remember when my brain started to feel healed and my mind started to feel clear,
Mm,
there was nothing like it. Like, and it wasn't for, say, the medicine, it was breaking free of trauma and actively working towards setting goals for myself. And I'm not the most active person in the world. Like, I'll go to the gym and I'll go through spurts where I'm there every day, but for the most part, like, I'm not the most active person on the planet. But that goes for, say, like, with my faith journey. Like, I'm no theologian by any means. I believe in God. I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and, like, what he did on the cross, like, saved us all from our sin, right? If you accept him.
mhm.
I am so encouraged by, like, even what you just said, like what he's done for us. It reminds me of a lyric from a song that was on the Passion record this year with Tasha Cobbs, Christian Stanfill, and Anna Golden. It's like,
Mm.
what he's done, all the
Yeah,
glory
man.
and the honor to the Son. And worship is so powerful. It's not a genre of music. There is, I consider August Burns Red, Flyleaf, all these heavy rock,
Come on.
Christian based, like, even non-Christian based music. Like, worship is, it comes in all different shapes or sizes, etc. Like, one
Mhm.
thing that John Cooper from Skillet recently was quoted saying is, like, even if a song claims to be, like, demonic, you can't steal music from God. It's a reflection of
Mhm.
worship. So it could be the
Yeah.
most, like, demon summoning thing on the planet. This is a hot take, but, like, it, in some way, shape, or form, the beauty in the creation reflects back to God. And, man, worship as a lifestyle, worship as not a music genre, like, what does it look like for you? It's going to look like something completely different
Mm.
for me, maybe to some
Yeah.
certain degree. And this will get a lot of positive feedback from some hypo conservatives for sure.
Get ready for the
What if,
letters, yeah.
like, get ready for the letters, bro? What if, like, being on an antidepressant and, like, chasing Jesus and going to therapy is a form of worship? Like, the lifestyle that you're living is chasing purity, chasing holiness, chasing to be more like Jesus every day. What if
Mhm.
that block or that mountain in your way is that anxiety and that depression that you're going through? And
Mm.
that mountain that you're getting over is the ego in your head telling you that, no, like, you don't need to be on that. Just a thought.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people that are struggling, like, don't take my advice. Just think about it. Like, think about what you're going through in your life and you make that decision for yourself. Consult with psychiatrist, therapist, youth pastor, close friend that you can trust, parent, mentor. Work it out for yourself. And just know
Yeah.
from my chair, like some encouragement would be, don't allow these things to hold you back. Because
Yeah.
I've done that for years and it's not healthy. And I would just want to encourage people, like, don't let that mountain like intimidate you. Start climbing that sucker. Don't climb it alone.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Do you know do you know the band Advent?
I do not, but it sounds amazing.
They're a yeah, they're a Christian, man, someone's gonna get mad at me for just calling them a metal band because it's but they're,
I
the
love metal music.
the drummer the drummer and the guy who does the screaming vocals for, the band Beloved,
Okay.
it's his band.
That's
And so
awesome.
he's like the front man in Advent, Joe Mustin. And Joe's become a friend of mine
That's
through
awesome.
the podcast and stuff like that. And so he was saying that they have this song called Revival. And if you listen to Advent, check out Advent. They're like, it's scary music. Like
Dude, I love
it's
it.
it's heavy, and some of the vocals are just like unrelenting. Like it almost sounds like I mean they're screaming vocals, but it almost sounds like a rap sometimes because of
Sure.
how just heavy and just quick and all that it is. And it's good. But yeah, like I call it scary music. But this song, I mean, when he was on, he talked about it, and I mean he calls it a worship song. And he
Mhm.
talked about experiences where, they'd be in these hardcore shows with all these kids, and they would purposely tour with bands that were not Christian because they wanted to be in those atmospheres, and they wanted to be able to be a light in the darkness and all that kind of stuff. And even for the aftermath of getting to spend time with dudes who were actively, Satanists and stuff like that, and just kind of wanting to insert themselves in that world and just talk to people and be real and be human and be a light. And then when you have those opportunities because somebody's struggling, to open up about what Jesus has done for them and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, kind of like in the midst of an atmosphere like that, this is what I'm getting at based on what you just said. In an atmosphere like that, where you would say, oh, it's an atmosphere of darkness, it's an atmosphere of this or that, and people are, it's like kids going crazy in a mosh pit and whatever. But he would talk about moments where they would have these songs that for them, they're professing and declaring the name of Jesus, and they would experience God's presence come into the midst of them, even in the midst of that dark environment where they were. And so, all that to say, to your point, so often I think we compartmentalize our lives to say, my spiritual life, the spiritual part of my life is when I'm reading my Bible and praying and going to church and talking to God and talking about Jesus and stuff like that. But also, like, it's the journey through my life, that worship is an ongoing thing. It's not just the songs that I sing, but it's the expression of my heart and my affection toward God, even walking in obedience and responding to him and all of that. And so, yeah, just kind of carrying that mindset and that attitude of being a worshiper throughout life, and not compartmentalizing it to things that I do on certain days of the week, but all of my life can be an expression of worship to him if I keep him at the center of it.
Yeah, and like when it comes to secular music and like Christian bands touring with secular bands, like that's an amazing thing to do. But like even circling back to what I said about like the Satanist music, like you have to guard your heart, you have to guard your ears,
Sure.
you have to guard your eyes from what you're letting in. But you have to be so careful. Like if you are not prepared and you're not staying like, and this is something that I've gone through as well, when you get in those scenarios, when you're around people that don't believe the same way as you, it's easy to get influenced. So like if you're new in your walk, or maybe you're super old in your walk, like for the longest time, or for as long as I can remember, I've been walking with Jesus. I was raised in church and such, but it never became like really real for me up into like my early teens. And then like I went through a season of like trying to walk off from it and then going back. Like
Mm,
you have to be so careful because you'll start to hear ideologies and things that don't align with your faith, but you hear it so much and you see the compassion in their eyes and they mean well, but they're not like
hmm,
advocating for the right things, and you'll start to believe those and you have to catch yourself. And then you go to a mentor and you're like, well, here's what I believe. And they're like, why do you believe that? And it's like, well, so and so, like, and this and that, and hearing compassion. It's like,
yeah,
well, you're getting like misguided. So, like, guard your ears, guard your eyes. Like, it's hard. Like it's so hard out there. And it says to
yeah,
be like in the world, but not of the world. It's easier said than done. Um, but you have to keep pursuing. You have to let people hold you accountable. That's something I'm still learning to this day. So like, I'm not sitting here claiming to be the most perfect person on the planet. Um, at the end of the day, like I do run a media agency. We do work with a lot of bands. We do a lot of events. Like it's hard and it's something you actively have to walk through. And for me being 25, like I haven't been there and done that on a lot of things. So I'm still young and not justifying anything, but like
Sure.
you grow as you live and you learn. And I just, I want to encourage people like, it doesn't matter how old you are. Like, I remember being in high school and hearing about Reset Movement, which was this awesome movement just
Mm.
encouraging people to have a reset for Jesus. I heard about it
Hmm.
at Winter Jam and I like went back to my school and started something called a Reset SC, which was for Social Circle, and just took it and ran with it. And I want to see kids do that. But when you have like some influence in your school, like you're also influencing other people and they're watching you. So
Yeah.
make sure like if you want to walk like for Jesus in the public eye, like no, you don't have to be perfect, but actively pursue like holiness, actively pursue what God has for your life. Check yourself, stay in the word, like stay in prayer. And like again, just to be super vulnerable, like that's still something like I'm learning to do, like to stay active
Hmm.
in everything. Like it's a growing journey. Don't give yourself unrealistic expectations, don't beat yourself up, just continue to get up and walk
Yeah.
and have people around you that are going to hold you accountable.
Yeah, man. That's huge. That's huge. Yeah, I wanted to ask you. Well, let's do this. Let's back up just a little bit and then we'll kind of catch up to where we are, and then maybe I'll have a couple more questions in the time that we have. But so you when did you kind of you started saying that kind of in your early teen years is when you started to get serious for God. Did you grow up in a Christian home, or how did you meet the Lord?
I did grow up in a Christian home. I would say around 12 or 13. We joined this church in town called The Avenue, and I fell in love with like the band was contemporary. I wasn't used to that. Like actively seeing like there was a drummer and guitar players, and it was like a
Mm.
rock show, and I was like super into Skillet at the time. So I'm like, let's go, let's do this. I'm going to church, and actively started serving, and the pastor would pick me up on Sundays and take me to church to like help
That's
do
awesome.
like pro presenter. So I would be in charge of like the lyrics
Yeah.
and things, making sure everything
Hmm.
gets set, the videos are in the right spot for the role, like the run of service, etc. And for years that was my safe haven, you know. And I really got serious about my faith when I got into that. Like I was in it through middle school, but when I hit high school is really when I was like, okay, like God wants me to use my voice. I was at a Super Wow event in Fort Myers, Florida, I think, or Fort Walton, something like that. I don't know. But Passion band was playing with Christian Stanfield, which is crazy because he was on the show this year. And they were singing or leading the song Always, and I felt God like lay it on my heart that I was going to be in ministry for the rest of my life.
Mm.
And from that point forward, it was like, man, like this is your life. You got to start making some changes. Like when it came to viewing pornography and just
Mm.
trying to fit in high school, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that was when I really started to change, and like it was an active change, like an outward expression of the way I was living my life and taking things. And then from that point forward, like up until I got into my I believe it was junior or senior year when I started experiencing panic and such, that's when I really started to slip in my faith, but then like actively pursuing it, if that makes sense. So there were trials and
Yeah.
tribulations along the way. I rededicated my life to Christ in high school at church and got like rebaptized. Not saying you need to do that, but like that was something that I personally wanted to do for myself. And whenever I go through like seasons of life where I'm really struggling and I get through it or make that declaration that I'm gonna get out of it, I'll get some ink, you know, what we all do these days. So it's it's a process. So the more tattoos you see on my arm, the more stories there are. And I'll probably be sleeved up by the time
That's
I'm
cool.
30. But you know what? Now you know, like it's not like, oh, he's been going through some sin or some hard stuff. It's like, no, like something really meant a lot to me. And I want to symbolize it and I want to remember it. like the next tattoo I'm planning on getting, my friend Josh sent me this. I believe it's a Greek Orthodox prayer, and it's just, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And I want to get that tattooed on my right wrist, just as like whenever I'm about to sign a contract or anything, a check, whatever it is,
Yeah, man.
like it'll be right there for like me to remember, like, is this glorifying God? And
Yeah.
it's not like oh, look at me, I've got the Jesus prayer right here for forgiveness to remember it. It's like, no, that's for me. Like, I didn't
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
what
yeah.
you thought about it.
Yeah.
And I love going to tattoo parlors and there being like a non-believer, and they're like, why are you getting this tattooed on you? And I'm like, oh, it's just like my thing, and get to talk about it and have a good time and hear their story, and not promising conversions by the end of it, and not promising like the best conversations. But you know what? Hopefully there's like some sort of inspiration from that conversation for them. But again, like, and I'm not endorsing people to go and get sleeves and stuff, but that's just my fun time,
Yeah.
it's just my thing.
So by the time you're 50, you might be running out of real estate. You might have to
I
start
don't
getting neck
know.
tats and
Like,
that kind of stuff.
I mean, you see Post Malone and Jelly Roll and rest
Yeah.
in peace, Aaron Carter, like just all over the Brian Head Welch, all over the face, dude. And I'm like, let's
Mm-hmm.
do it. Have some teardrops under my eye. Let's go.
I'm trying to remember who it was. There were some dudes that got tats like under their eyelids, like on the underside of it. I was trying to remember
Um,
who that. I feel like it was a band that did that. I can't remember
That
who that
seems
was.
very painful. I've seen people get it under their
Incredibly
lip, and I'm
painful.
like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah, like
no,
yeah,
I'm
right
good.
there. That's got to be crazy. That's got to be crazy painful.
That has to hurt. I don't
um
want that.
yeah, no. I feel you, man. But yeah, so you got um one of the things that you mentioned earlier, which I think is so cool, kind of through your process, right? Through your process of growing up, walking with Jesus, and kind of what you alluded to just now of him, placing this call on your life from a young age, and showing you things that maybe needed to change and all that kind of stuff. But walking with God throughout this, even dealing with the struggles, and when you're starting to go to these ministry events and you're dealing with the anxiety and you're dealing with these different things, it's just so cool because when we look at scripture, when we look at the people that God chose in the Bible, like the people that God often chose were the people that wouldn't have been everybody else's first choice. And I'm so grateful for that because I'm not that guy. And it's just so cool. Like we look at David, David was, he wasn't even in the conversation when Samuel came and he was looking for the king. Like he wasn't even called in from the field. They just left him out there and acted like there were only 6 sons instead of 7 sons instead of 8. And so he's left out there, and Gideon and Paul with all of his stuff of coming into the kingdom, and then it's like, well, we don't want to be around this guy. He was just killing Christians. What if he's trying to trick us? And like the stigmas that just get attached um to people for different reasons. But it's just so cool because God is so good that he's not scandalized by any of that stuff that scandalizes other people. There's
Mm,
something that goes on in the world today, Trevor, a lot. It's always gone on. We see it in the time of Jesus in the Bible too, but something that I think goes on a lot today. Um, I just call it this. I just call it religious insecurity, and it's
mm,
like this thing where you have to, like, people sometimes feel this need to distance themselves from somebody who's struggling, or who distance themselves from somebody who's got some kind of a stigma. We see it in really explosive ways today with like cancel culture and all that kind of stuff, right? It's like, oh, we're going to pull our endorsements because this person did this, or we're going to do that. And it happens in the body of Christ too. I've seen it happen where people distance themselves from a brother or a sister because they got stuck in some kind of a sin issue or something like that. And it's like this insecurity that comes where I don't want to be stigmatized by what they're carrying, or I don't want to have to get caught up in the thing that they're going through. And it's so interesting because God never does that with us.
mm.
Jesus never did that with people. I mean, Jesus was so comfortable going to the homes of people that the religious leaders thought he was nuts for going to hang out with these people. They thought he was a sinner because he was hanging out with sinners, and and
Yeah.
and all of that. And when it comes to our calling, and the like, God calls us in spite of all of our challenges and insecurities and issues and struggles and all of that. and he's just so good, and he's so faithful. And I love, I love this conversation, man. I love the fact you mentioned you're only 25 years old.
Yeah,
um
yeah,
and I just feel like God's been just so good and so faithful to bring you through the journey that he's brought you through, and to have you in this place now where a lot of it is, I'm sure, because of the struggles that you've had, that you're in this place now where you've got such a passion for this, and you're able to speak into the lives of people, and you're able to encourage others, and you're able to shed light into dark areas that other people might not have the heart for, or might not even just know how to do it or whatever. But because you've lived life, and you've had experiences, and you've had struggles and challenges, and you've been real and honest about those challenges, it's kind of given you this authority where you're able to stand with people that are walking through things that are similar, or they're walking through some other kind of a struggle, and to stand with them and say, you know what, like, you're struggling with something, but you're my brother. You're struggling with something, but you're my sister, and I'm going to stand with you, and we're going to walk through this together. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. And I'm just, I feel like there's a question in here somewhere, Trevor. Forgive me, but there's, how important, man, in your estimation and from your experience, how important has the community aspect been in your life, for some of the struggles that you've had, and then also just in working with people? Like, how important is it for us to be connected with others, to be in community, to walk together, to be able to be open and honest about the struggles and the things that we are dealing with, when it comes to, just experiencing freedom and kind of the journey of recovery? How important is that we, I feel like it's almost a dumb question, because it's everything. I feel like it's everything. I feel like it's
yeah,
so important. But I'm just asking it this way because I want to hear your thoughts on
yeah.
it. So yeah, just
And
the idea of community.
it's not a dumb question. And first off, like every single one of my mentors always like, how's your community? How's your community? How's your
Mm,
community? Do you have
that's
community?
good.
Are people holding you
That's good.
accountable? And that can answer the question right there. Like if it's people that I look up to and trust for all of the things, like, and they're telling me or asking how's community, how's community every single time I talk to them, it's an important thing. And it's something that I actively pursue. It's like you need community around you. You need people you can trust. And just to touch on not touch, that's weird. Touch on cancel culture within the church, like a lot of the things that people get canceled for within the church, like with me struggling with this, like I can relate with it. Spoken or unspoken, like I get it. Like I've
Yeah.
fought the mental
Yeah.
battles in my head. And when you start opening up about things that are cancelable within your life, biblically,
Mm,
like when you shine light on your sin,
yeah.
it's going to start to fade away, and it
Hmm.
gets lighter and lighter, and it gets darker in your mind, or like the darkness starts to flee from your mind, whether it's sin or
Mm,
temptation, the lust of things. And this is me speaking to myself too. Like when you start to bring these things out and you start to realize that you're not, and that other people are like going through these, it starts to get a lot lighter, and the weight starts to get a
mm,
whole lot easier on you because you're not carrying it alone. And that comes with
that's good.
community. And don't rely solely on community. Rely
Wow.
solely on like your relationship with God, and have conversations. And when you forget to pray or you forget to read one day, don't beat yourself up about it. Just kick back and start where you are. um, it's so important, and it's the most important. Have people that are going to hold you accountable. Let them love you. When you fall, get back up. Allow people to pour into your life. Don't get offended when they come and like ask you the hard questions. I've been asked hard questions in the past 24 hours that I was like instantly just wanted to hang up the phone. But you know what?
Mm,
Let
yeah,
those
man.
people talk to you, because a lot of times that thing that you do not want to talk about is the thing you need to talk about. So whether it's in
Wow.
business, personal life, your marriage, your dating life, whatever it is, don't find your identity in things that you struggle with. Find your identity in Christ and what who he says you
Mm,
are. And if you're listening to this and you're not a believer, and maybe you've heard of me through like musical affiliations or business or whatever, like this is what I'm actively going through, and I get asked my opinion for some reason on a lot of things and for advice. this is all I got to say because it's actively what I'm going through. It's actively
Wow.
what I'm pursuing. And a lot of times we live in this narrative of like, I've got to get through this before I can open up about it. And for certain things, that does make sense. For me, like, guys don't want to talk about vulnerability. So there's a lack thereof for people to hear from, like, especially within men. Um, they don't talk about the emotional things in life. They don't talk about the anxiety and the depression they struggle with. That's why
Mm,
I forgot what the statistic is, but like one of the number one causes of suicide is within men. They don't talk about it. I was told yesterday of a close friend who's battling with that. Man had written out a letter and everything and didn't follow through with it, luckily. And sometimes it's the people closest to home, and it never gets easier to hear because I've had like mentors that have died by suicide,
mm,
and kind of going into like the whole
yeah.
cancel culture and like within your friend groups when you start to like, oh, that person's a little too toxic for me. Like there are times when people are going through things and you need to take a break, but even the strongest people can be struggling with suicidal ideation and wanting to take their life. And my encouragement, my thoughts, my prayers, like if someone's struggling heavily and they talk to you about suicidal ideation, suicide, depression, if they're talking about it, it's probably not attention seeking. It's
Right.
something that needs to be addressed. And
Right.
if it's not you to walk through it with them, be open to listen and try to steer them in the right direction. Because you don't want to get that phone call the next day that they're no longer here with us. I can promise you that.
Yeah.
And it happens all too often. I mean, it's like every time you turn on the news or even read a newspaper. I think it was 2 years ago in my tiny town of Social Circle. I'd never heard of a suicide taking place at our high school here, and within 2 weeks, two, like back to back.
Wow.
And I was on a tour when that happened. I'm like, man, like out here traveling the country, and 5 minutes from my house, people are struggling. So you never know. And I don't want to end the episode on like a dark note or anything, but like these are real things that real people are struggling with
Yeah.
all the way back into like elementary school nowadays.
Yeah.
People are at war for what their identity is, for what their hope is, for why they are on this earth. And I don't have all the answers, but for me, like, you have to realize that there's a reason for you to live. There's always a reason to choose to live. And that's all I can say. Like, choose to live. And if you see someone that's struggling to make that decision, even if they're not like upfront about it, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, because a lot of
Come
times they're
on.
ready for someone to ask them and they're praying for someone to ask about it. And if they say no and they get defensive about it, like, okay, I love you and I want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what.
Wow. Yeah, man. No, it's so good. And I'm really glad that you went there. And I think that you mentioned like how young it's getting. I think suicide is one of, if not the leading cause of death for kids in that the like maybe 10 to 12. It's like that younger age group. It's the statistics of suicide in that age group, that kind of adolescent, uh, preteen, young teen age, it's skyrocketed, man.
It's
And it's
skyrocketing
so
across the board also. Like
yeah,
if you think about this, the number one cause of death amongst like people who have survived the war, veterans like over the age
yeah,
of 40 or something like that, is suicide. So think it's
yep,
getting younger and it's also getting older. Um, I've had relatives that I never met that were well on into their old age that have died that way. And
hmm,
it's unfortunately just becoming more and more common. And I think these are conversations that we need to have,
yep,
especially amongst like our peers and our brothers or sisters out there that are struggling heavily, because I've had those thoughts. And having community around you is huge, especially like if you've
yes,
gone through losing someone to that. um it's all that much more apparent to like think about like, man, like what if they were right? And if you're having those thoughts, like that's an attack. Get help. Reach
Yes.
out to like death2life.com, death the number 2life.com, heart support beneath the skin, 988. Even on non-working phones you can call and get help.
Mm.
Reach out, like somebody out there wants to talk to you. There's teen hope lines, there's even like for LGBTQ matters, like no matter what you're struggling with, somebody out there wants to talk. And I'm not here to
Yes.
get into like what your struggle is. There's resources for everybody out there. Somebody out there wants to speak with you. Death to Life offers all of the
Yeah.
above. So does Heart Support. Somebody wants to speak with you right now. And if you're in that spot in your head where you're like, man, I don't see a point in waking up tomorrow, just know like somebody out there really, really would love to have a conversation with you. And nobody wants to like, and don't take this the wrong way, nobody wants to go to your memorial service next week. They want to talk to you next week.
Mm.
They want you to be happy and thriving. And sometimes that's an ongoing battle, but it's so worth it. And there's always a reason to choose to live.
Amen. And through this podcast, I've had the opportunity to have several conversations, particularly with people who work in the veteran community, veterans and first responders, because the rate of you mentioned this, the rate of suicide among veterans and first responders is just astronomical. And one of my friends who's been on the podcast a few times, Dr. Joseph Capps, one of the things that he says is, I think he said it every time he's been on, that people are literally dying to talk to you. And
Mhm.
we never, the reality is that we don't always know. Very often we don't know what somebody's going through. And we've both had experiences in our lives, and so many people are the same way, that you're dealing with all kinds of stuff, some kind of trauma or just some kind of mental struggle, or whatever, and nobody knows it, because on the surface you kind of put on a facade, you put on a front. I mean, I'm pretty sure you went out back and were puking in the bushes, like, not, doing it in front of everybody, right? Like, we try to it's our human nature to hide these things, because we want everything to look good. I mean, now, everything on Instagram and everything on social media, I'm putting my life out there, I'm showing you all the good stuff, so that you think that everything about me is good and in order and healthy. But the reality is, we don't know who's, getting beat up when they get home from school. We don't always know, how the kid who's being bullied at school is actually internalizing that struggle and that trauma that they're going through, or, how that person is struggling with their marriage, and they're bringing that to work with them and getting chewed out by their boss. And we don't always know about the internal struggle that's going on and what somebody's carrying. And we're getting to the end of our time here. So maybe just the final question here, like, what are some things, or how do you feel like that, just in general, like, we can kind of in daily life become better at being a resource for people who are struggling? And I don't just mean like,
Mhm.
let me give you resources. I just mean, how can we be more human and be more compassionate, and just kind of get involved in the lives of people, whether we know that something's going on in their life or not, because again, so often we don't know. And I feel like with people that we know, that we are in relationship with, and with people that we don't have relationship with, that maybe we get 5 minutes with them standing in line at the coffee shop, or whatever it is. But there's all different interactions that we have with people on a daily basis. And what are some things that you think that we could just do to be more mindful, or maybe some mindset adjustment that we could just carry with us through life, that we could be more of a source of maybe hope, or strength for people that are just dealing with stuff that we might not even know about?
And this is going to sound like super too simple and such, but
I
it's
love
not. Like,
simple.
be kind, love
Yeah.
people, be genuine. One of the people that I've been following on, or two people that I've been following on social media are Chris Kale from Five Finger Death Punch and
Come on.
Jacoby Shaddix from Papa Roach. And they post like their daily gratitudes every day. And those aren't
Wow.
Christian bands by any means, but like
Sure.
they influence me as people that express gratitude and understand the value of it. Let's say you're in line at Walmart or going through the line at Chick-fil-A because it's the Lord's chicken. Can I get an amen? And they're having a bad
Amen,
day.
brother.
Like they have a terrible boss, and when they get home, they don't get to turn it off because their parents are abusive or their spouse is
Exactly.
abusive.
Yeah.
The kid at school that you run into, and maybe they're like doing something super delinquenty, if that's a word, if not trademark, throwing eggs at your house. Like you don't know what they're going through at home. You don't know why
Yeah.
they're outwardly expressing this anger. My brother was watching a show last night called Friday Night Lights, and one of the scenes is Michael B. Jordan coming home to his mom's apartment, and his dad has been in jail, and he comes in and his dad's sitting there and he's like, what's he doing here? He's like, oh, he's here for dinner. And he's like, what is that? And his suitcase is on the couch, and he's like, what is that?
Mm.
He's like, it's my suitcase. And basically he's moving back in. And they have this scene when he wakes up in the morning, his dad's like talking to his mom and such, why is he still here type thing. And he like has that moment where he stands up to his dad, and his dad's like telling him like, you're not a man, this, that. And he's like, well, a real man
Mm.
doesn't walk out on his family. And
Wow.
just think about the kids that are playing high school ball and they're acting out to their coach, acting out at school, and at home you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
A parent hasn't been there and they just decide to walk back in their life and like nothing happened. They're getting abused at home. Their parents an alcoholic. Their dad is suicidal, taking it out on them, abusing drugs. You don't
Mm.
know what somebody's going through. You don't know
Yes.
you don't know if they can escape it. Think about a 13-year-old right now that has Twitter and Facebook blowing up their phone. We're all addicted to social media, and they're getting
Mm-hmm.
bullied on at home by their
Yeah.
parents. They're getting bullied by their people at school. They're getting bullied at school. Their teachers aren't listening to them. They're failing all their classes, and they're like, I'm just a mistake. Nobody gives a rip
Come
about
on.
me. Think
Come on.
about those people. And when you start to think about that, and then you start to write down the things that you're grateful for in your life, like, man, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that God's given me the position to be this kind of person. I'm so glad that God's given me this trait. And it's like, man, there's so many things to be grateful for, but somebody out there hasn't realized that yet.
Hmm.
Be grateful that God's put you on this planet. Be grateful that you're not experiencing X, Y, and Z. Know that somebody
Mm.
else out there is experiencing not just X, Y, or Z, but A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way through Z.
Yeah.
Somebody out there is going through it. And not that anyone's issues are bigger than anyone else's, but listen here, like, you don't know what they're going through. It's so easy to be going through the line at the checkout and have your AirPods in and not show a smile and be gracious to the person that's bagging your groceries.
Yeah.
It's so easy to not take your cart to the little cart thing in the parking lot at the
Come on.
grocery store. Practice gratitude, show people love. Even if you're a blatant Christian and you walk up into someone wearing a Black Craft shirt or some sort of pentagram, it's so easy to like, ugh,
Right.
why? You don't know what they're going through. You don't know why they believe that. You don't know why they're running the complete opposite way as you. And I'm not judging the people that
Mm-hmm.
are, because hey, we've all got the things we struggle with, and nobody's too far gone. One of the tattoos that I just recently got says it's never too late, and it comes from a song by a band called 3 Days Grace, and it's a suicide prevention
Yeah.
anthem. And it's like, I've gone through things in my life where I'm like, man, it's probably too late, and it's not. It's never too late. And that's not a Christian song either. Like, oh, this dude listens to so much secular music, he's going to hell. Like, shut up. It's a good song. People are out there struggling and they're looking for hope, and
Yes.
you might be that last bit of hope they need to decide to like make that decision, that brave decision to choose to live. And I say the term choose to live a lot
Yeah.
because it is a choice that people make. And sometimes when people die by suicide, like there was an impulse and there wasn't like room for a choice. But if you're
Wow.
listening to this right now, I want you to know that there is a choice, and I want you to make that choice to choose to live. And there's so many resources out there. One of the things that we've put out there within the Trevor Talks world is called Choose to Live, which we pulled in. It's not a Christian event. There's cursing throughout it. There's people who are universalists, atheists, Christians. We're all coming together, because if you're not having conversations that with people that don't believe the same way as you do, what are you doing? So
Man.
know that there's someone out there that wants to speak with you, that they love you, and that God has a purpose for your life. I genuinely believe that. And if you don't believe that yet, I just know that's me giving the most hope and encouragement that I can, and all that I know how to give is that hope. And it's just an outward expression of what God's doing in my life, and I pray that He continues to do that in my life, and that it's able to encourage you to do the same in yours.
Mm. Man, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I think that's a beautiful way to end this episode. And I love the simplicity of that, because I love the fact that the little things that we do in daily life really do matter. Like that little 8-second conversation that you're willing to have with the cashier at that at that supermarket checkout, because they've, had their line backed up and everybody's been cussing them out, or whatever. And I've been there, man, where I can so easily just be so focused on what I have to do, and like how this person's making me late to the thing I got to get to, and just kind of getting that tunnel vision. But you know what I mean, you just never know the kind of difference you can make in somebody's life, the kind of value you can add to somebody's day, by simply taking a few seconds to just love on somebody, whatever that looks like. I mean, in some cases it can be as simple as a smile. In
Mm-hmm.
some cases it's a hug. In some cases it's just sharing something. I think it was just on the last podcast I did, and I know we got to wrap this up, but um I told this story about this guy who walked up to this woman sitting on a bench in a park, didn't know her, but just felt like the Lord laid on his heart, go and tell this woman that I think she's amazing. Simplest word anybody's ever given to another human being. He walked up to this woman. This would have been true for anybody. He didn't even have to hear this from God for it to have been true. He could have walked up to anybody. He just said, "Hey, I just saw you sitting there, and I felt like God told me to tell you that He thinks you are amazing." And he went about his day. And that woman ended up in the church that guy went to. And from that day forward, within 2 years, he didn't know that woman was she was living a life of prostitution. She was homeless. She was drug addicted. All this stuff was going on in her life. In a 2-year period, from that moment on, that was the catalyst. She owned her own home. She had a regular job, not doing, not in sex work. She was in church. Her life, she was saved. She was free from drugs, all of it, man. And it started with such a simple word, where someone was willing to take 4 seconds out of their day to just listen to that nudge of the Holy Spirit, and just to tell somebody that they're amazing in the eyes of God.
Mm.
And it could be
Yeah.
so simple, and we just never know. And so I love that you did that. I love that it was a simple response, because that means that it's possible for all of us to walk this out and to live our lives in a way where we're just open and surrendered to the Lord, to enough, to the point where we're willing
Mm-hmm.
to share, to talk, to hug, to, whatever it might be that he's leading us to do. And so I appreciate that so much, man. And just before we wrap this up, if you would just share a couple of things where people can go to check out your podcast, because it's such an awesome resource, where people can go to check out, just any other content that you put out there that you'd like to point people to. And then if you would, you mentioned it earlier, but maybe just remind us of a few of those places that people can go for anybody out there who is struggling with maybe suicidal thoughts, or who just need somebody to talk to. If you would just share about some of those resources again, that would be amazing.
Of course. And all of the Trevor Talks stuff can be found at trevortalks.co. Um, check it out on YouTube, every podcast platform, all the links, the socials, and everything are on there. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. That's secondary. The first thing is deathtolife.com, which is death, the number 2 life.com, heartsupport.com, beneath the skin. I believe beneaththeskin.org. To write love on her arms. There's so many
Yeah.
resources out there.
Yeah.
The suicide text
Hmm.
line. So many people out there want to speak with you.
Yes.
And like, even with you talking about the prostitute, like one of the 180 stories that keeps popping up on my news feed is Joshua Broom, who's now a pastor, who was at one time one of
Mm,
the highest paid porn stars of I don't know what it would be his time, one of the most
mm-hmm.
notable, and now he's a pastor with a loving family and kids, and is able to tell his story of like coming out of that dark place of being suicidal and depressed
Wow.
and such. So like if if anybody can proclaim like from a standpoint of like, hey, I was living like very different lifestyle and God was able to redeem me from that, Joshua Broom has an amazing testimony. And there's just so many people out there that are struggling with suicidal ideation, depression, anxiety, feeling worthless, feeling alone, feeling as if they can never be loved, and that's just all a lie from the pit of hell. So just remember,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
you are loved. Someone out there wants to talk to you. Make a phone
Yes.
call. Shoot somebody a text if you know they struggle. Shoot them a text. Tell them you love them. Smile at the person at the supermarket. Ask them how their day is going. Treat them like a human. If you see a homeless person,
Come
instead of
on.
shrugging or saying no, I'm thanks before they can even get a word out, which is a very common thing to do right now. You don't have to give them money, give them some hope. And if they still want money after that, you did your job. You gave them some hope. And if you have some change, give it to them. It's not on you what they do with it. It's the fact that you're willing to help them out. Um, just love people, be a kind person, chase Jesus, and
Hmm.
don't forget to listen to Duke's podcast next week.
I'd love it, but whatever, man. Yeah, whoever you are, whatever you're going through, whatever your struggle is, there's always hope. We love you, and man, thank you guys so much for being here, for taking the time to check out this episode. It really means the world to me. I pray that this content blessed you as much as this conversation with Trevor blessed me. I hope you're as encouraged as I am. And if you know someone who maybe needs to hear some of this, that maybe is dealing with something, struggling with something, share this episode with somebody that you think needs to hear it. Or better yet, share some of those resources that Trevor talked about. Send a text. I love that you just said that, man. Send a text. Tell someone you love them. It's just being human and being close with people and living in that community, creating that community. It's so key. Trevor, I appreciate you, man, for being here, for all of your time, and I appreciate you so much for the work that you do, this work that is so needed. The way that you give people permission to be authentic, to be themselves, to open up, it's so important. The conversations that you're having in your daily life are so important, and opening up more of this conversation so that that stigma continues to be reduced, so that we can walk in freedom and experience life together. So I appreciate you, man, so much. Thanks again so much for being here.
Dude, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Bless you guys, and hope to see you on a future episode.